Hello again. I'm Tripp Rogers. He's the Hall of Famer Mike Sheck. We are the Fantasy Sultans, week number 12 in the NFL, otherwise known as bye-mageddon, because there are 6 teams on bye. You've got some really good fantasy performers that are on bye this week. And listen, everybody, it seems, has holes in their lineups. Well, if you keep it right here, we will give you the news, the notes, the info you need to win, because it's coming down to the home stretch. This is the time to shine in fantasy football. Hall of Famer, you were shining last week. Oh, did I see you as the top point scorer in the Best Buy League?
Yes, you did. Yes, you did.
Yes, you were wonderful. And, of course, we don't need to mention the fact that, once again, I beat Matthew, as we expected. Fantasy Sultans dominated this weekend. Dominated. We still want to know how Johnny I is winning the Fantasy Sultans League itself. That's one of the most astonishing things. You know, as I said to him, I said, you're doing good in fantasy football, and you've got a Simpsons-themed game on ESPN this year. You are living large. You know, this is the season of Johnny I. Not the summer, the season.
The season
of Johnny
the
I.
four season, actually the four seasons of Johnny I.
So Mike, let's review a little bit. Week 11.
Yeah.
Thoughts?
Well, we saw some studs and duds. I'm going to start with the studs. Detroit Lions. I mean, how about that? 7 touchdowns on the first 7 drives.
Studs.
Yes. Each drive going for at least 60 yards, over 640 total yards of offense. That's 6 more touchdowns than Jacksonville scored in points. So, you know, also the 4th time this year, by the way, that the Lions have had more touchdowns than incompletion. So, yeah, they're doing a lot better than a lot of teams in the National Football League. Anthony Richardson, well, he got a little revenge tour last week against the Jets. Now, you could say, well, it was against the Jets, and you might be right about that. But at the same time, let's not forget, this guy was benched because of his performance and came back and turned in a nice one. 1 passing touchdown, rushed for 10 times, 32 yards, 2 touchdowns.
Yeah.
Definitely a nice performance, but I'm still a little bit worried about Richardson. He does have the inconsistency trait in him. And live from New Orleans, it's the Taysom Hill Show, starring Taysom Hill, running for 138 yards, 3 touchdowns, and a career high 50 yards.
And how many people had him on the bench?
Yep, certainly did. And, well, I didn't, though, in the Best Buy League. Maybe that's why I did so good.
That could be why you are the Hall of Famer and I am not.
Now let's go on to the duds. And 5 running backs, including 3 of those, well, the 3 best in the league, posting a season low point totals. I'm talking about Derrick Henry, Jonathan Taylor, Kyron Williams, Aaron Jones, and Tony Pollard. Tripp, should we really be worried down the stretch here that these workhorses aren't performing?
I think the Derrick Henry, listen, you are Baltimore. You brought in Derrick Henry for a reason, and you don't want to have Lamar doing everything. But that 2-point conversion, Henry wasn't even on the field. That's worrisome. But I just think I don't know if you worry about a 1-week trend. I don't think I'm worried about that. You look over a couple of weeks. Everybody has an off week sometimes. I think Derrick Henry will be fine. I think Derrick Henry owners will be fine. One of the advantages you have this week is, yes, Baltimore is playing, so you can start Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry and not be worried about that. However, there are other people who are really worried. I mean, Mike, seriously, I'm not worried about them as we go down the stretch. Everybody has a bad game every so often. I think I'd be more concerned if I drafted Christian McCaffrey Because I don't
Yeah.
think Christian McCaffrey has really done that well. And in fact, the 49ers really have not done well. And that was a big subject Monday when I was driving back from the golf tournament. I listened to Dan Patrick and Colin Cowherd because I don't normally listen to them. And I listened to what they were saying, and they all said the same thing. This is um, this is worrisome that the 49ers really are struggling so badly offensively. And you think, oh, they get a shot in the arm with CMC back. No, he's not. And again, the fantasy people who grabbed him won, and they thought, oh, I'm going to get a push for the playoffs. No, not happening. That's a concern. I think I'd be more concerned. But Brock Purdy put up monster numbers at the quarterback position on Sunday for the 49ers, but they ended up losing that game, and that hurt them in their race for the playoffs.
I'd be a little bit worried about Jonathan Taylor. Depending upon the Anthony Richardson situation, could take away some goal line touches for Taylor that could create touchdown opportunities. Also, let's not forget Henry and Taylor have week 14 buys, both on a bye that week. So, I mean, and that's at a point where it's a make or break situation if you're on the fence looking to get into the playoffs and you have any one of those players. So I'd be a little bit concerned in that situation too. Late buys sometimes. Sometimes we like to pick up players with a early or mid, buy rather than having a buy at the very last minute right before. You never know what situation you're going to be in. Maybe teams in your league, but there's also the case where you're on the bubble, and that could make or break you getting into the playoffs. So we got to watch that, and definitely something to keep in mind.
Well, again, we had talked about it, and I had said this because I had taken Josh Allen, and I knew he had a Week 12 bye. So I went and grabbed quarterback in both my teams that I have Josh Allen on. I grabbed a quarterback a couple of weeks ago. I got Tua, and I also have Jared Goff. So had Jared Goff. By the way, you were talking about the Detroit Lions. Two things I want to make. Detroit Lions, perfect passer rating again for Goff. And Goff really doesn't have to throw the ball around that much because they're just running and killing it with Gibbs and Montgomery. So I mean that's Laporta injured, but he's okay. And Amon-Ra St. Brown is gold. I mean that Detroit offense. Listen, did we ever think in our lifetime we'd say the Detroit Lions are Super Bowl favorites?
Yeah, I mean they're the best in the NFC right now. So yeah,
they are. The other point I wanted to make, and you were talking about Anthony Richardson. The one thing I think that is kind of bothersome, Michael Pittman Jr. has basically fallen off the charts. And in fact, sneak preview, I'm going to throw him on my export list this week because he just has not done anything. Flacco helped him for a couple of weeks, but Flacco's on the bench again. And Richardson seems to have forgotten about Michael Pittman Jr. And I think that's bothersome. That is because he's a guy that was drafted midpoint fourth, rounds 4 to 6, even 7. So that, again, a player drafted in the front half of the draft, you expect to get some production out of, and you're not getting that from Pittman. In fact, Pittman, unless you really have a need, I think he's probably on the bench or you can cut him. But I said he's going to be on the export list for me. You mentioned some studs and duds. You're right. How about some import exports? Hall of Famer, go first. Tell us what we need to know because we got some holes in our lineups.
Yes, we do. And Cam Akers is the place to be. Cam Akers is the place
to be.
Yes. Cam Akers in Minnesota, I'm talking about. He finished with 25 yards, caught 2 passes for 11 yards and a score. Now, you might not be thinking with his stats that Cam Akers is really the place to be, but Aaron Jones has been underwhelming, and Akers could push for a larger role of the workload moving forward. He's flashy, and he can make an impact over the next few weeks. So he goes up against run defense also that rank in the bottom half of the league, starting with the Bears. Yes.
The Bears.
Let's stay in the NFC North, and I'll look at wide receiver Christian Watson of Green Bay. He caught 4 passes for 150 yards. Now, contested situations, yeah, he is fighting for the ball. He is making big plays. Now, you're probably wondering, should I start Reed or should I start Watson? Well, if you're looking for touchdowns, so far we've seen a lot from Reed, so he would be the guy to grab. But if you're looking for yardage opportunity, it would be Christian Watson because he got those 150 yards last week. So definitely some upside with Watson. All right, let's go to New England wide receiver Kendrick Bourne. He's been slowed down from a knee injury, and he did not play in week number 10, but he returned last week to catch a season-high 5 passes for 70 yards and his first touchdown. Patriots really don't have that go-to receiver, so it's like you're really trying to catch lightning in a bottle trying to get him. But you know what? He is worth a pickup, in my opinion. Little bonus points here. I'm going to give you a defense with 2 favorable matchups upcoming. The Washington Commanders, they're tied 7th in the league with 29 sacks, and they're physical in shutting down opponents. Now, they play Dallas, who looked atrocious with Cooper Rush at quarterback, and they also play Tennessee. And the one thing I'll say about Tennessee, because I was there last week, beautiful mountains, not a good football team right now. Let's go to the exports, and with 6 teams on a bye, the last thing you need is definitely players that are not performing. And here's one of them, Deontay Johnson in Baltimore. Now, when Johnson was traded to Baltimore, reports kind of indicated that they were looking at improving their wide receiver position. Well, rightfully so. I mean, they really weren't satisfied with Zay Flowers or Rashad Bateman. But Johnson has yet to play 20 snaps or more in 30% of the team's snaps in any single game that he's been in a Ravens uniform. Just 2 targets, 1 reception, and 6 yards in his last 2 games. I mean, Baltimore's offense really, in my opinion, does not support more than 3 pass catchers, much less 4. So, I mean, right now, he's 4th on the team's targets. And realistically, looking at it, he's 5th behind Justice Hill. So this is not a player that you want on your roster. One more export, Atlanta tight end Kyle Pitts. Just 6 catches for 75 scoreless yards over the last 3 games. Fewer fantasy points than Will Dissly of the Chargers having in week number 11. Yeah, that's right. I said Will Dissly of the Chargers. Pitts, only 3 touchdowns on the season, less than 500 yards. Now, yes, he is on pace to exceed his numbers from 2022 and 2023, but he's nowhere near close to the performance of 2021. Kyle Pitts is a guy that a lot of people have been hanging on to for the longest time, and I say now's the time to cut him. I mean, if you could really afford the space, maybe keep him for a hope and a prayer in the playoffs, but otherwise, no, cut him.
Yeah, Kyle Pitts has been, I think we've gone both ways on Pitts. We've said, I wasn't sold completely on Atlanta, and I don't know. Some weeks you get Atlanta and they look good, and some weeks they don't look good. And I think that's one of the problems. Everybody wants to blame Arthur Smith, but he's gone. Raheem Morris is there, and I just, that Atlanta offense just does not. Kirk Cousins, I don't think he's performing that well. The fact that they put Michael Penix Jr. in last week does not bode well. Okay, I'm going to go now. First, I'm going to go with exports, and I'm going to, I mentioned it, or I already telegraphed this one, Michael Pittman Jr. With Richardson back, you thought, okay, here we go. They were hooking up last year. No answer. And the problem is Pittman has been so bad this year. You cannot trust him in fantasy. At this point, I say Dumpsky, and I have him on one of my teams, and he was Dumpsville. Also, going to go with Dumpsville on Raheem Mostert. Now, Mostert, you thought was going to go back to his 2023 workload if A-Chain got hurt, but he's still the next man up. But at this point, doesn't look like A-Chain's going anywhere. And Miami's offense is starting to gel now that Tua's back. Again, Tyreek Hill has not been Tyreek Hill-esque, but he's still not bad. And of course, you throw in Jalen Waddle. I don't see Mostert being relevant at this point. I would say get rid of him. Again, maybe keep him on your bench, but I just don't see where it's going to happen. Again, if A-Chain goes down, then that would be something you'd want to grab. Okay, running back. And I'm going to give some love. I'm going to give some love to the Hall of Famers team. Jonathan Brooks. Now, remember, everybody drafted him, and he thought, okay, great, he'll be coming back, blah, blah, blah. And nothing's happened. And people are starting to dump him. Well, if he's available in your league, and there are some leagues he's available in, I would grab him because, one of the issues is, and one of the reasons he's also available is a lot of people dumped him on the bye, but Chuba Hubbard has done a great job. He's been great this year. But I think, Brooks gets into the lineup and he could help you out, especially down the stretch. And if something happens to Hubbard, then obviously this is the guy. Again, if he's available in your league, might be worth a pickup. But at this point of the season, again, you want to get guys who are going to help you. Another guy who is probably going to help you, Rashawn Johnson from Chicago. Now, remember, I was high on him earlier this year, and I think I had him in my imports. And then I had him on my exports because he did not pan out. Well, put him back on the imports here because he is getting some red zone work. And at this point of the season, red zone work and touchdowns, that's gold in fantasy. Gold. So I think definitely Rashawn Johnson would be somebody to grab. Wide receiver, Mike, you talk about Christian Watson, and I agree with that. But listen, Cleveland's offense with famous Jameis has done well and is doing well. Although the running back situation, Nick Chubb is not the fantasy stud we thought he would be. He's still viable there in the running back position. But I want to talk wide receiver, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, it was either last week or the week before, you had Jerry Jeudy on the import list. Smart call. I'm going to throw Elijah Moore on the import list this week, and the reason is because that offense is starting to click. Elijah Moore and Jerry Jeudy getting some work. I mean, let's not forget Tillman, wide receiver 2. He's basically the wide receiver 1. But these guys are getting some work. And again, you might want to have a nice wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 3 because you may need them for a spot start. And speaking of spot starts, if you have, I'll use, because I have him, Tyler Bass, the Buffalo kicker, or you have a kicker on bye this week, you're going to want to grab somebody. I'm going to give you an extra import this week. Look at Jason Sanders for Miami. He is available in a lot of leagues, and the reason is because Miami went through such a drought in scoring. He wasn't scoring, and a lot of players dropped him because they were trying to get better kickers. I mean, kicker's not a position you carry 2 of, and I'm carrying 2 in one league because of the fact I want to keep Tyler Bass because Buffalo kicker is pretty good. But again, Jason Sanders could be a spot start on this week they call bye-mageddon. Hey, listen, something we got to talk about, and forgot to mention it in the beginning because I'm a moron. He's the Hall of Famer. I'm the moron. We are going to drop our episode of the Fantasy Sultans for next week on Wednesday. That's a day earlier than normal because we've got 3 games on Thanksgiving. Well, 2 games you'll want to watch and 1 game you'll want to ignore. I mean, good time to eat that Giant Cowboys game. By the way, tickets are available for $25 and you're sitting like 50-yard line. I mean, seriously, this is going to, the only thing I can say about that game, Dallas will not extend their record to 7 games of being behind 20 or more points at home. I guarantee you that right now. But and there's also, of course, the Black Friday game. So we'll get you set up for that next week. Again, the podcast will drop Wednesday at 9 a.m. So you will be able to get it. I want to let people know that so that they can try and make the moves that we already have made it, and will already make your life miserable. Just say
it's buy Mageddon this week, and then next week there's no buys. It's a full
well, the Thanksgiving, we always have the Thanksgiving game with the 3 games on one day, actually 4 games. That's why there are no buys. And then you come back on week 14, you've got a couple of buys. But I again, this is, we were talking about it last week, and I said, I don't think I said 4 teams I think are on bye next week. I was wrong. But once again, he's the Hall of Famer. I'm not. That's why. Because I get things wrong. But the fact that, and I think I forgot to run down the teams too. So second reason why I'm bad. Atlanta is off this week. Buffalo, Cincinnati, Jacksonville, New Orleans, and the NYJ, the New York Jets. So Aaron Rodgers cannot disappoint this week because he's not playing because they're off. They're on bye. But Buffalo, New Orleans, Alvin Kamara is out. Taysom Hill is out. Those are 2 names off the top of my head with that. Jacksonville, there's nobody to talk about because they're awful. They are awful. Cincinnati, Joe Burrow. What does he have to do to win a game? I don't know. Get his team to play some defense. He needs somebody. He needs to go play 2 ways because Cincinnati's defense is awful. But anyhow, so that's kind of the plan we got going. And of course, Hall of Famer, let's not forget to let people know about our radio show on Sundays.
Yeah, we were on Fox Sports Radio New Jersey. You could hear us in Central Jersey at 93.5 FM, 1450 AM. Of course, we're at the Jersey Shore, Fox Sports Radio Jersey Shore, 95.9, 100.1 HD3, 95.9 HD3 as well. Of course, we are also on Fox Sports Radio New Jersey.com, as we like to say, on the .com. It is Sunday at noon, Sunday with the Fantasy Sultans. We give you all the information you need to get you ready for the games on Sunday.
And of course, the podcast is here for you. Again, don't forget, next week we'll drop the podcast Wednesday at 9 a.m. Again, questions, comments, strategy issues, whatever, you can email fantasysultans@gmail.com. And of course, also don't forget my other podcast, Tripp's Take. I talk about whatever is on my mind. And right now, I can't think of anything that is on my mind. If you like the music, it's the same place as you get this podcast, which is, of course, Spotify for podcasters and YouTube. Just search for Tripp's Take. Like the music of the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And you like Alice's Restaurant, by the way. We'll be playing that on Thanksgiving. Listen to WTRSradio.com online. We're here to help you. We want you to win, because if you win and you listen to us, you take our advice and you win, it's a win for us. Unless you are playing in a league against us, then we do not like that. We want to beat you. We want to be the Detroit Lions and you be the Jacksonville Jaguars. Mm-hmm. Okay? Just saying that. We love our listeners, but we want to beat you because there's a reason why he's the Hall of Famer and I am not. Tripp Rogers, Mike Sheck, we're the Fantasy Sultans. We are the guys who will help you win your league. As we always say at the end, we are the Fantasy Sultans.
And you are not.